Well, good evening, everyone. I don't know if you heard Maringo Mike. I could hear his voice, but I didn't see him moving on the screen. So we may have fouled up again in presenting you Maringo Mike. So anyway, we can get started here. As he was supposed to be telling you, my name's Dale Parrish. I am the state director for Convention of States here in Indiana, and I want to welcome you to our broadcast this evening. We've got another great broadcast for you. We're going to be bringing you in our first segment, as we normally do. We're going to be bringing you our own Convention of States volunteer, Debbie Stewart, will be presenting another chapter in our constitutional literacy program. And so we'll be bringing Debbie on very soon here to get her started with you this evening. Now, I also want to I'll mention it now, and if I can remember, I'll mention it again. We're going to have Debbie come back on our next broadcast on January 20th, and we're going to have her present another chapter in the course or the program Constitutional Literacy. Tonight, she's going to be talking about the powers of Congress, but on the 20th, she's going to be covering the Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause in our Constitution, which has contributed a great deal of unintended consequences. Let's call them at this point in time. But like I said, we'll be bringing Debbie on here very shortly, and we'll be getting her started with her presentation this evening. Now, I just want to mention to you, as I have said before, sometimes we encounter technical problems. If your screen freezes up or goes blank, just understand we've encountered a technical problem. And if that happens, just plan on joining us next Monday evening for our next broadcast. All right, so enough said on that. And we'll get started here very soon. After we do Debbie, after we do her presentation, time permitting, I'll get into giving you some general information on our organization here in the state of Indiana, give you some updated numbers, and again, if time permits, we'll get into what we call the basic tenets of Convention of States. Now, also tonight, I will make every effort to recognize those of you that are viewing this evening. So, and feel free to make any comments or enter those comments as the broadcast progresses. Enter those comments and keep the comments short, okay? And if they're short enough, then I'll flash them on the screen here, and like I said, we'll recognize you and get your comment on the screen. So, without further ado, I want to let me get things moved over here so I can bring Debbie up into the screen. I'll unmute her and bring her up into the screen. There she is. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Dale.
Get yourself centered there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. All right, Debbie. Let me bring up our agenda item. I know our items. You wanted to talk this evening about, in this chapter, the powers of Congress. So take it away.
Okay. Well, so first of all, just talking about the powers of Congress, I wanted to review just kind of some of the objectives that we're going to cover in this chapter. So we want to talk a little bit about what are some examples of some of the powers of Congress. There's basically about 20 of them. If you look in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, it lists 18 subsections, but Michael Ferris has split one of those out, two of those out into two more. So he says 20 powers. We want to understand the basis on which the Founding Fathers granted those certain powers to Congress rather than to state legislatures. understand the 10th Amendment, and also understand exclusive and concurrent jurisdiction and why that's important. Okay?
All right.
So let's talk just a couple definitions here before we get started. Is concurrent jurisdiction, which it should be very rare, is where there's more than one level of government involved. And the way our Constitution was written was that we would very much minimalize anything where the state and the federal or local state are doing things together. It makes it very complicated. So we typically like to go with exclusive jurisdiction, where only one level of government is involved in a situation at a time. That's the ideal constitutional principle. But as we're going to talk about in this chapter, we've gone further the other way. Now it seems more like concurrent jurisdiction is much more popular, or I won't say popular, but common, and exclusive jurisdiction is not as big as it used to be.
Okay. All right.
So we want to stay away from concurrent jurisdiction, and we want to be more focused on exclusive jurisdiction. Okay. So just to get into some of the 20 powers of Congress, some examples, again, listed in Article 1, Section 8 are the government, Congress has the power to enact and collect taxes, to borrow money, to regulate commerce, that is between nations, states, and Indian tribes. It controls the rules for becoming a naturalized citizen, the rules for bankruptcies, and also controls our money system. They fix weights. They have this system of weights and balances. They can punish counterfeiters. Patents and trademarks are with Congress. Piracy and other crimes can be punished by them. They can declare war, fund the military. I'm not going to list them all, but that's about 2/3 of them right there. But as you can see, these powers were put in here by our founding fathers to say, these things, either the states can't do it on their own, or it just makes sense for the federal government to do it because it touches all the states. And so you need an overarching government to take, like declaring war. You don't just want one state going to war, you'd want the whole country going to war. So you would rely on your federal Congress.
And Debbie, are these referred to as enumerated powers?
They are enumerated, and that's the enumerated powers are those that are very explicitly spelled out in the Constitution. Thank you for saying that.
And I know that's always a topic when it comes to budgeting and you know what the government is really authorized to spend money on. It was only supposed to be based on their enumerated powers, but of course that has gone off into other directions. So anyway, so enumerated powers. All right, good.
Yeah, and that leads us right into the 10th Amendment, because the way our government was, the way it was put together was that beyond these 20 or so powers of Congress, they should not be doing the other things. The states should be doing the other things. So basically, the 10th Amendment says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states and to the people respectively. So anything outside those 20 powers really should be the state's authority and their jurisdiction. But we've gotten way far away of that, where the U.S. Congress is implementing many things, and that's really not inside their jurisdiction. Okay?
Right.
That's where the 10th Amendment comes in. It's very explicit. Again, that was the last amendment to the Bill of Rights, because I think the founders knew, hey, we're going to make sure they know that outside these 20 powers, the federal government should be involved minimally. All right?
Okay. All right.
Okay, and so just a quick comment on Joseph Story, and he's brought up in this chapter. He was the youngest man at 32 to ever be a Supreme Court justice, and to hold the office, and he served under Chief Justice John Marshall, and President James Madison appointed him. And he wrote a book called, it was a multi-volume book called Commentaries on the Constitution, which really talked about the history of the Constitution, the history of the 13 colonies. He brought in the Federalist Papers, and I've never read the book. Honestly, it's a multi-volume book, and it'd probably be difficult, just because of the language that it was written at that time. But it really does. It's a very comprehensive book to read about all that went into the Constitution.
Okay.
Okay, and then so let's just talk a little bit about concurrent jurisdiction and exclusive jurisdiction. Again, the intention was that only one level of government should be involved in almost every issue. And today we've gotten way far away from that. There's too much overlap. So the state's overlapping with the local, the federal's overlapping with the state. And so what you have then is when you go to New York, you see a state level education building, you see a local, you see a city, and then you see a federal, 4 education buildings right in a row there. So you can imagine the amount of money we're spending to do and redo when that's probably not necessary with a lot of things. And so the point is, if Congress would stay within their parameters, that will allow the states to work on more of the things they need to work on that's important to them at their local level.
So how do you think how has this happened? How has the federal government gone beyond its limitations? What do you think has contributed to this?
Well, I think that there's probably a couple of things, just as in my opinion, just through reading through this and some of the studies we've been doing, is one, I think there are people that actually feel like government control is good.
Right.
And there's a methodology of thinking that really wasn't the founders' thinking, but they're in our government and they're in our offices and they've gotten in there, and that's where they're heading. I think the second thing is throughout the legal system, we've had courts that have made rulings on things that weren't constitutional, and then those get set as precedents. And so then the next case comes along, and instead of going back to the original founding fathers, they use the precedent that might have been wrongly ruled to begin with.
Exactly. And I think we'll be touching on that a bit next Monday night when you address the two the general clause, general welfare, and commerce clause. That's exactly what has happened there. Okay, good.
Exactly. Yeah, and just to touch on these Federalist Papers, they were a series of about 85 essays that were written by John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison. And these 3 men wrote them because when the Constitution was signed in Philadelphia in 1787, all of the states had to go back and have their state ratifying conventions to get the states to vote on to ratify it. And so they started in New York by writing essays to support and convince people that this new Constitution was really the way to go.
Exactly. Now, I told you I wanted to make a comment on this
Sure.
papers. I strongly recommend, and I think I may have made this comment before, quite honestly, but I strongly recommend that if you want to read the Federalist Papers, get a publication where the language is somewhat of an interpretive publication, because I found it very, very difficult to read the original, based on the original language that was used at that time. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to understand, very hard to read, very hard to understand. So I found a publication, and there are publications available out there where the Federalist Papers were interpreted in such a way and stated in a our current language, where it made it much more understandable. So the Federalist Papers are very interesting. They're very long, but you're right. It was you get an insight as to why they did things the way they did.
It's interesting too, because they did it in secret, so they went under the name Publius, so nobody knew who was actually writing them, because they didn't want that to be influencing what people were thinking.
Right. So what they were, like you said, what they were trying to do was they were trying to convince the states and convince people that this is why they were doing what they said, why they said what they did, because of the ratification process that was underway. So So they're very, very, very important documents. Very important documents to understand and to know as you go through and read the Constitution.
Well, and they've been, I know in our class, we've had numerous examples where when there is a court ruling and they go back to the Constitution, they're not quite sure how to interpret that. And so they'll go back to the Federalist paper to say, okay, but this is what was quoted out of, Federalist paper number 10. And then because of that, then the judge would see, oh, okay, so this is the original intent of this case and this issue we're talking about, and those Federalist papers really are a good place. That and the state ratifying conventions and the Philadelphia Convention notes themselves.
Right, right. Okay. Enough on the Federalist papers then, huh?
Yeah, so just to wrap it up, really, there's about 20 powers of Congress. They're very explicit in the Constitution. They're enumerated. They're very easy to stay within, but we've gotten way far away. The 10th Amendment explicitly states that any power that's not specifically delegated to the federal government belongs to the states. And the whole point of that is we need to stay within the boundaries of those enumerated powers, and we need to get back to that.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, I had asked you to comment a bit on impeachment.
Yeah.
And I guess, this comes under one of the powers of Congress, right?
It is. It's in Article 2, Section 4, I believe, is where you can find it. And it says that the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and the conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. So that's why there's a big question out there. The two articles of impeachment on President Trump are obstruction of Congress, which is nowhere in the Constitution.
Right.
And the other one is, now I'm drawing a blank. It's obstruction of Congress and
abuse of power.
Thank you. Abuse of power. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so it's made it through the House now, and they voted to impeach him. So technically, he's been impeached. He's the third president to ever be impeached. But the Senate now has to hold a trial, and then after the trial, they'll vote on it. So although there's only ever been 3 presidents that have been impeached, Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and now Donald Trump, none of them have ever been removed from office. And it'll be interesting to see what happens because Nancy Pelosi's been hanging onto those 2 articles of impeachment. She had to hurry up and get through them, but to get it done. But now that she's got them, she's been sitting on them for a couple of weeks. But word has it she's going to send them over maybe sometime this week. We don't know.
Right. That's my understanding. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it's part of our daily news, isn't it? What's happening with the impeachment.
Well,
so,
I think most people want the truth and the justice to be done. We want the truth of what actually happened, and those who are trying to make truth out of something should be held responsible.
Right. Okay. All right. Now we're bringing you back next Monday evening.
Yes.
7 p.m.
Yep.
And you're going to talk about the Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause. And, you mentioned in your presentation tonight some of the precedents, Supreme Court decisions that set precedents, and how our government has used these precedents to make laws when it wasn't intended to be that way. And I think we'll find in these 2 clauses how things have happened just like that with both the Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause.
Yes.
So anyway, that's going to be very, very interesting. I know when you get into those 2 clauses. So looking forward to that.
Me too.
So, okay, Deb, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Have a good evening. We'll see you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. let me get over to uh, our next segment here. I don't know why I'm having such a trouble uh, getting things moved around here this evening, but I wanted to bring up my PowerPoint presentation, and I'm having trouble getting over there to it. So bear with me here just a second as I try to move things along. And it's not, let me see here. Why are we? Okay, Debbie, I'm going to remove you there. And in order to get over here to this, um, hmm, okay, I don't know what's happening here. I'm going to go up here and, excuse me, folks, give me just a second here to set this back up. There we go. Okay, I'm sorry for this uh, hesitation here. All right, now hopefully you can still hear me. Yeah. And I'm going to go to the slideshow option on this PowerPoint so that you can get a full view of it on your screen. So that should give you a full view there. Okay. Um, I wanted to give you this evening, I wanted to give you some information on some of the resources that we have available to us here in Indiana and nationally in convention estates. The main resource that we have available to us is the national website, conventionestates.com. That's www.conventionestates.com. And this, you'll hear us make reference to this website frequently. This has a wealth of information, and if you're interested in joining convention estates, this is the first step you should take, is go to this national website, open an account with us, and sign the petition. So now embedded in, and you're going to hear us make reference to this website frequently, but also embedded in this national website is our state website page, conventionestates.com/Indiana. So obviously a more focused look at the state of Indiana. Social media platforms, we're on various platforms. Facebook, Convention of States Indiana. This broadcast this evening is coming to you through that Facebook page. So if you use Facebook, you need to go and find us on Facebook, Convention of States Indiana. YouTube channel, very much an educational resource for you, COS Indiana YouTube channel. We have narrated PowerPoint presentations. We have recordings of these broadcasts. We also have links to a podcast that one of our co-state directors and legislative liaison, Paul Phillips, does. These are very, very good podcasts, by the way. The Free to Be Free, and very informative. So whenever he generates a podcast, we always put a link on our YouTube channel so that you can easily access that podcast. Other social media platforms, Twitter, hashtag COS Indiana, Instagram, Convention of States Indiana, LinkedIn, and many other social media platforms. So if you're into social media, you should be able to easily find us out there. We'll give you a few numbers as to how we're doing in the state of Indiana. In 2019, we surpassed 41,000 supporters here in the state of Indiana. Been growing at a tremendous rate. Just to give you an idea, when I took over as state director back in 2017, we had about 14,000 supporters. And this has been happening with not only in Indiana, but all across the country. but we had about 17,000 supporters in Indiana at that time, and we have just grown tremendously. And like I said, in 2019, we surpassed 41,000 supporters. We have a goal now of 2020 to reach 52,000 supporters here in the state of Indiana. So, hoping and looking toward us continuing that tremendous growth rate. We have a lot of activities, a lot of projects planned for this year. So, all to grow the grassroots. Okay. We have about 2,900 volunteers, people that have indicated a willingness to help out if called upon. And then we have about 40 individuals right now in leadership roles in our state organization. Now, this is very important. If you have any desire, any inclination to get involved more in our organization here in Indiana, I encourage you to, here's this website again, conventionofstates.com. Go to our national website, click on the menu selection, Take Action, scroll down to where it says Become a Leader, and look at the different volunteer opportunities that we have available. If anyone is of interest to you, open it up, read about it, and go ahead and make application. You're not obligated in any way, but go ahead and make application. And what that does then is your name then comes up on a report that I see every day, as well as a few others. And then one of us will be in contact with you to talk about your interest and in that particular position, and discuss with you going forward how you can get more involved. As I say, we need more leaders in our state. So if you have any inclination, any desire to get more involved in our organization, this is the first place to go. Go to our national website, conventionofstates.com, click on Take Action, and take a look at the positions that we have available. All right. Well, due to time here tonight, we're going to bypass the basics of Convention of States. We'll hold that for our next broadcast. Now, I want to recognize some individuals here this evening, and let me see if I can get this one on here. There is Susan Lyon, Rick, and Susan Lyon. Rick is a brand new leader volunteer, and I'm glad that they tuned in this evening. Rick is going to become our event coordinator for the state of Indiana. Very, very, very interested in him coming on. We've been looking for a person to fill this position for some time. So, Rick, thank you very much for coming on and joining in with us this evening. So, Rick and Susan were telling us, saying hello to us this evening. So, glad to have you in this evening. And let me see here who this is. I don't know who this is. Convention of States in hello, COS supporters. I'm not sure who did that. Okay. And I see this one is from Jerry Rowe. This is Jerry is one of our existing leaders in the state, and he is one of our systems information analysts for this in the state. So he comes on and joins us every Monday evening. So glad to have you here. As a matter of fact, Jerry also wanted to say hi, Susan and Rick. So you'll get to know who Jerry Rowe is as time goes on and as you get through your training, Rick and Susan. I think I saw another one on here. Okay. Ken, I got, there's Ken Kashuba. Ken is, he's saying, good job, Debbie. So very good. Ken is our state communications coordinator, and Ken does a great job for us. So he's another person in one of our leadership roles. All right. Well, thanks everyone for your comments. I appreciate you entering those, and I hope I covered all of them this evening. Now, I mentioned earlier, next Monday evening, 7 p.m., we're going to bring Debbie back, and we're going to have her give us another episode, chapter, whatever you want to call it, in the constitutional literacy program. And that episode is going to cover the Commerce Clause and General Welfare Clause in our Constitution. So you want to be sure and tune in next Monday evening to take in Debbie's presentation again to us. So let's wrap things up this evening. And I always like to wrap things up with this quote from our president, Mark Meckler. And Mark says that, there's a fundamental question facing our country. And that question is not what should we do? The question really is who will decide? And that is the question facing us is a two-word question, very simply, who will decide? So once again, I want to say if you're joining us this evening, or if you're watching a recording of this presentation, if you would like to get involved in Convention of States here in Indiana and nationally, we would love to have you involved. And ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say it in this way, that we believe what we're trying to do here is saving this country. And we think that there are certain structural issues in our federal government that need to be addressed, that are not being addressed. And I didn't get into those this evening. That's part of the basics part of our presentation. But we believe our movement is, we're trying to save this country. So we would love to have you involved with us and be a supporter, and even get involved in a leadership position. So if you're starting out the new year and you've got a New Year's resolution to get more involved in Convention of States, we would love to see you do that. So look forward to seeing you and talking to you. In the meantime, put us on your calendar for next Monday evening at 7 p.m. and we'll join and talk to you again next Monday evening. Good night, everyone.